Hi, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome to the 2024 RCPP Town Hall webinar series called Creating Your Proposal. My name is Bree Hebron with Metaphase Consulting, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Today is May 23rd, 2024, and I'd like to inform everybody that this session is being recorded. We have multiple participants registered for this webinar, and we're looking forward to presenting to you today. So for our agenda, we're going to start with announcements and just with a brief overview of the Town Hall webinar series. But most of our time today is going to be focused on today's topic, the RCPP Classic Narrative Questions, and then we'll finish up with the opportunity for Q&A. I do want to highlight that the next webinar presentation in this series is going to be a very similar presentation, but it's going to focus on the AFA narrative questions. This webinar is scheduled for June 6, 2024. Because the FA delivery model is very different, we've got the two separate webinars. Today is focusing on the RCPP Classic, and then the June 6th webinar is focused on the AFA narrative questions. You're entirely welcome to attend both webinars, but depending on which proposal format that you're choosing, you want to make sure that you're aligning to that particular set of responses. So for the announcements, just before we get started, I want to go over some of our announcements. The webinar slides and the recording for this webinar will be posted on the RCPP website as soon as possible. So as we've mentioned before, the recording will take a few weeks to be posted to allow time for 508 compliance. So we appreciate your patience as we go through that process. So presenters will introduce themselves with the camera on, but turn them off to conserve bandwidth. I'm going to turn my camera on briefly, just so that I can say hello to everybody, but want to make sure that everybody has the best experiences possible. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off. Please note that the camera and mic will be turned off for the webinar participants for the duration of the presentation. But the chat is active and you may ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to get to all of those answers at the end. So we're looking forward to seeing some excellent questions from you today. If we don't get a chance to answer all of the questions today, we will provide follow-up responses in an updated FAQ posted on the RCPP How to Apply webpage. We will also post some links to important resources in the chat today for easy access. Throughout the presentation, you'll notice a QR code to a survey. We greatly appreciate if you could take a quick minute at the end of the presentation to provide your feedback. In addition to this webinar today, we have several additional sessions that will cover each section of the proposal, and the registration links for those sessions are on the RCPP website under How to Apply to RCPP page. There will also be another RCPP outreach webinar on May 30th, 2024 from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time that will cover the same information covered on the April 23rd webinar. So I do have one additional announcement. As a reminder, and actually a slight update from our last webinar, the deadline to apply for application assistance for projects that support underserved entities in critical conservation areas has been extended. Previously, we announced that it was Saturday, May 18th. It is now Friday, May 31st. If you are interested, you can use the RCPP Notice of Funding Opportunity Proposal Support Questionnaire to submit an application. You can download that from the RCPP How to Apply website. And when submitting the application, please use the RCPP Proposal Support Request in the email subject line. So NRCS has engaged with Metaphase Consulting to support outreach and education. So today, also on the webinar, we are joined by RCPP to provide support for creating your proposal series. So as we cover this topic today, please remember that if you have further or specific questions, you'll want to contact your state RCPP coordinators. The contact information is available on the RCPP How to Apply website, and we'll drop the link as well on the chat. So, as I mentioned before, this webinar is one of a series of town hall webinars designed to help all applicants understand proposal requirements. And this series is open to all applicants. And you'll notice on this slide, we also have the link and the QR code for the survey. Just wanted to highlight that. Again, you'll see this throughout the presentation. So this slide just shows where we are in the webinar schedule. Over the next several weeks, you'll have the option to attend any of the additional webinars in this series. As we've seen before and as we continue, each of these webinars are focusing on a specific portion of the proposal and will include a Q&A session as time allows. So the webinar topics flow in the order that we suggest you work through your proposal responses. It's going to be a slightly different order than how you're going to fill out the proposal when you enter it into the RCPP portal, but this is critical to some of the decisions that you're going to need to make in a specific order to be able to facilitate this process. So last week we covered funding requests, and today, as we mentioned, we're covering the classic narrative questions. And then, as I mentioned, we also have an upcoming information session that's going to be a repeat of the original webinar on May 30th. So as always, I just want to highlight sort of where we are in this decision-making process. So we're going to align to that. And at this point, before you're focusing on the narrative questions, you should have made a decision on the type of project you're applying for, whether that's CCA or state, multi-state. And if you're not sure which one, remember that for critical conservation area, your project must fall under the established boundaries. You will also need to determine which type of funding pool you're applying for, whether that's classic or alternative funding arrangement or AFA. And in the previous webinars, we've also covered the topics of partners and contributions, financial and technical assistance, and then also the funding requests specifically. And as we've said today, we're going to focus on the RCPP classic narrative questions. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to Seth from RCPP to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Bree, and I'll briefly turn on my camera and shock everyone with my appearance. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again today. As Bree mentioned, we are encouraging folks to please take the survey and provide us feedback, and here's another link to that survey. What I'm going to do today is take us through the narrative questions, basically introducing them, of course, and then talking a little bit about the individual questions and providing some sample responses. As to the sample responses, I'll try to provide a fairly generic but probably responsive example, and then I'll provide some less responsive examples and try to dissect each to give you guys an idea what reviewers will be looking for when they look at your responses. So first off, a reminder, as you're putting together your narratives, the purpose of the narratives, of course, is to inform the evaluation. And so while you're writing your narratives, you're going to want to think about the evaluation criteria of impact, partner contributions, and partnerships and project management. Ultimately, just because a partner's doing something great and has fabulous contributions, maybe it won't address a resource concern, so you don't have impact. Or maybe you've got a great impact with your RCPP dollars, but you don't really have any great partner contribution. That's why there's different legs in the evaluation criteria. You don't have to meet all of them perfectly, but the evaluators are going to be looking for enough information on each element to assess them individually and then come up with a cumulative score. So when you're thinking about your responses, you need to be thinking about the different bits that you're being evaluated on. Fluff and puff about other stuff isn't going to help your score, right? You really need to be focused in on evaluation criteria. And as is shown in the orange box down below, the successful proposals will have a pretty strong set of partner capabilities that are brought to the table. Partners who are really prepared to implement an RCPP project, their proposal is going to pretty clearly illustrate that because the verbiage is going to align with the NRCS implementation requirements, and it's going to look like you know what you're talking about. And finally, your proposal should have sustainable and measurable outcomes and approaches to generating them. So that is the basic what you're thinking about as you start to think about questions. There's 18 narrative questions in the current RCPP Classic funding notice of funding opportunity. There's that changes slightly, and the verbiage in the questions changes slightly from year to year. So of course you need to be actually reading this year's questions and responding to them. If you have a prior user guide or something, it's pretty easy to be thinking you're responding to the question, then you're in the wrong place, right? The current questions are listed in the 24 proposal guide for partners Appendix C. They're also in the portal, of course. And ultimately, you're going to use the narrative questions like we talked about to address the evaluation and ranking criteria, making sure, really, really sure, that your project has a clearly defined project resource concern, clearly defines the roles of NRCS and the partners, both for FA and TA, shows us the contributions that are going to amplify the impacts of the RCPP funding, and directly addresses the ranking criteria in the proposal. I'm going to talk about these questions in a different order down below than they appear in the user guide or the portal. I'm just going to lump them by what their content is, and I'll show you that now. Because what we basically did for the purposes of this presentation was to lump the 18 questions into 6 groups. We're going to talk about the resource concerns and conservation purposes of your project. Then we're going to talk about the FA activities and the contract types that are going to be used to deliver those FA activities. So that's all RCPP funding. Then we're going to talk about the project area and the proposed work, i.e., have you really thought about your project area? Is there a need for the proposed work? I'm going to talk about how you want to assess outcomes, what contributions you're bringing and what other partners you're bringing with you, and then finally, what outreach you're prepared to deliver. The last being a very specific requirement of the statute, so we have its own section. The others being more general requirements of all projects. Ultimately, a lead partner is the only party that can decide on the correct response for a proposal. And I hear from Metaphase and the states pretty regularly, hey, how much can I do for the partner as far as writing? Nothing. The partner really needs to be writing these proposals. What we're here for, both Metaphase and NRCS state coordinators and the national staff, is to help you understand how RCPP works. You need to figure out how to relate those RCPP program rules to your proposed project. The key to that is the second bullet in the orange bullet box below. If you haven't thoroughly discussed your conceptual response to different questions with NRCS, you may not even know what the question's about. Of course, you should be able to get something from my presentation today, but thinking about it in terms of your particular project and the particular question, you're really going to benefit from talking those things through with your state coordinator. And of course, really, the more you can make yourself directly answer the question and avoid flowery language about how wonderful all your folks are and all the great stuff they've done in the past, just give us lists. We want to see what has happened. We don't want to read a big dissertation about how pretty it all is. So with all that said, we are into the first group of questions. This group of questions deals with resource concerns and conservation. I'm not going to read them to you here. We will jump to the next slide. And my compatriot Tammy has agreed to graciously spare you my voice for a second and read you the first question.
Glad to help, Seth. So under the resource concerns and conservation examples, there are 3 questions. The first of 3 is question number 1. Describe the compelling need for the project and an overview of how the project will generate targeted conservation benefits. For proposals within a critical conservation area, CCA, please note how the project will address one or more of the CCA priority resource concerns.
Thank you, Tammy. So just looking at this responsive answer, you guys can read it as well as I can, but I'm going to read you parts of it and tell you why we think it helps contribute to a responsive answer. More than 150 years of intensive mechanized agriculture has impaired soil health in project area corn and soybean farms. Soil organic matter has declined from X to Y. You've defined the problem, you've recognized the problem, and you're getting us set up to believe you know what to do about the problem. That's looking like a good response. Cover crops are the fix. Yay! They're going to add up to Y. You've done your work. You know what you're doing. RCPP funds in this project will be used to cover crops. Great. We know what we're doing. We're going to pay for cover crops. The project's going to rely on NRCS delivery for 60% of the FA and most TA. Oh, wait, that raises some questions, which are answered in the following sentence. Partner FA contributions will reduce producer out-of-pocket expenses. Great. The partner's going to chip into the producer's cost share and directly support our RCPP contracts. And doesn't look like the partner wants to provide TAI. They really just want to do some TAE. We understand what the project's about, what the roles of the partners are, and what's going to happen. On the other hand, we get a lot of responses that are not responsive. Most of them are not short, like my example here. Generally, the biggest problem with our non-responsive answers is too much verbiage. People put in a lot of stuff from their mission statement or their incorporation papers or their last successful grant. None of that's relevant to this question. We really ask you to focus in on the exact verbiage of the question and answer it. But this particular answer, project will help producers stay on the land. Yeah, it's a nice idea. It doesn't deal with any of the question at all. It doesn't talk about a resource problem. It does not talk about what the solution to that problem is. And it does not even recognize the terms in the question. So you really haven't shown us anything here that's going to make us want to give you money. Next slide.
All right, so the second of the 3 questions concerning the resource concerns and conservation examples is question number 5. Describe how this proposal will benefit and or address one or more of the priority areas and considerations listed in the national funding opportunity.
Thank you, Tammy. So here again, the responsive answer is going to get into some analysis of the actual problem and some presentation of the expected impacts on that problem. Based on NRCS payment schedules, rates for cover crops. Okay, you've already said you understand how we pay for producer contracts because you've told us about payment schedules. That's a big step forward. Combination of RCPP FA and partner contribution FA, that's the RCPP dollars and those partner dollars towards producer cost share we heard about on the last response, are going to treat a certain number of acres because we know how many dollars they are and we know what the per unit cost of cover crop is. So you should be able to calculate that. Pretty simple calculation. Not so much in a project where you've got 85 different practices, but if you've got a very targeted project, give us some details. Oh, and those acres we know are about 25% of the total eligible acres that are planted to corn and soybeans. Great. We've got some more information that tells us you understand your project area. The project goal is to treat 45% of the acres, which we recognize is not consistent with the area-wide plan goal of 50%, but man, are we doing a great job. We're all but 5% of that area-wide plan, and we know the area-wide plan is out there. Cool. Additional partner outreach will be structured around contribution-only demonstration plots and field days and has been proven in prior project to increase participation, blah, blah, blah. Great. So there's a little fluff at the end, but it does tell you why your additional work is valuable, even though it doesn't directly feed our FA contracts. So if you've got work that doesn't feed FA contracts, i.e. outreach or a large outcomes assessment, you need to try to wrap it into your answer, but you need to focus your answer on the benefit of the FA dollars. Okay, not a responsive answer. Cover crops are good for soil organic matter. They increase the and increased soil organic matter has been proven to save the world. Yeah, we know that. We work for a natural resource agency. We do not need you to tell us about the general benefits of good farming. We need you to tell us about the specific impacts of your project. And we need to do it in the terms that makes us believe you know what you're talking about. Next question, please.
All right, so the third related to resource concerns and conservation is question number 15. Describe how this project will help agricultural and forest producers implement climate smart conservation activities and or otherwise address climate change mitigation and adaptation. If the project will utilize NRCS's climate smart and agricultural activities, identify them and the metrics that will be used for measuring and reporting either a reduction in greenhouse gases or carbon sequestration.
Thanks, Tammy. So before I get into the first responsive answer, this might be a good point to highlight the fact that not every question is going to have an answer for every project, right? It may well be that you're not using the climate smart agricultural activities. If you're not, then you just say we are not using the climate smart activities and you don't put in a bunch of fluff about it. On the other hand, if you've discussed with the state coordinator what those activities are and you're comfortable that they're part of your project, tell us about it and do it in a compelling way. So the partner will work closely with contracted producers to document net changes in agricultural inputs, including but not limited to fuel consumed and fertilizer applied. Those are the two big contributors to greenhouse gas that we can fix, right? Fuel savings of X, dollars per acre per year, whatever. Tell us very specifically about changes that you think your project is going to affect based on the project features, whether it's land management or easements or whatever. On the other hand, a slightly less responsive answer would be cover crops included are on the climate smart commodities list and will be included in every producer contract. Well, that's true, but it doesn't tell us that you've thought about what the actual benefit of installing those cover crops in your local environment is. You need to get to that level of specificity for this to be a truly responsive answer. It's not the worst answer in my non-responsive answer list because it probably does meet some level of the climate smart commodities definition, but it doesn't go very far down that path. So now we'll jump into the next group of questions. This group focuses on the financial assistance activities and contract types. I'm not going to read you these questions any more than I was the last, but I'm going to remind you of what the financial activities and contract types are in RCPP Classic. And they're different in RCPP Classic than they are in AFA. In RCPP Classic, we have 5 financial assistance activity types: land management, rental, US, and entity-held easements, and watersheds. So those are your FA activity types. Each has a section in the NFO that describes what it means. Then we have contract types. The contract types are not described in the NFO, and those really will come best to light when you discuss with your coordinator, hey, in our RCPP Classic, we think we're going to use producer contracts, but we might need some other contracting mechanisms. What other contracting mechanisms are available? The state coordinator may tell you about supplemental agreements, and they may tell you about federal contracts. There are different ways that we can augment our FA delivery model in Classic, but the basic expectation is producer contracts. So, financial assistance activities and contracts, examples, and I'm going to let Tammy save my voice for a second.
Sure, Beth. First of 2 questions is question number 2 related to the proposal. Describe the RCPP financial assistance FA activity types. Example, land management, rental, entity health easements in proposed project, and document anticipated conservation benefits of each. Document the rationale for each proposed FA contracting method. For example, land management producer contracts versus a supplemental agreement, entity held easement due diligence via an NRCS on-call versus a supplemental agreement, and relative benefits of each, included contracting method.
Thanks, Tammy. As you can see, we're also victim to the long-worded verbiage sometimes. Question's not the greatest. Neither Tammy nor I wrote it in its current iteration, but you guys have to respond to it. So there's that. And a responsive answer in this case is shorter than the question itself. FA in this project will be delivered exclusively via land management rental program contracts, as this mechanism is well suited to securing direct producer involvement and buy-in in the targeted practice cover crop. Done, right? You don't have to say anything about other stuff. You just directly hit the question. Not a responsive answer. The partner will use a mix of land management funding and entity held easement funding to address project resource concerns. You haven't told us how either of those activities will address a project resource concern. You haven't told us what contracting mechanisms you'll use. It does, however, document eligible FA delivery mechanisms. That last bullet's just a little off. So yeah, again, you don't have to get real long-winded to have a good answer. Amy, would you take this question too?
Sure. Question 16. In RCPP Classic, land management financial assistance funding is typically contracted by NRCS via program contracts directly with eligible producers, including landowners. If this project proposal anticipates partner delivery of RCPP funded land management financial assistance, additional program requirements apply. If this project will include partner delivery of land management financial assistance, document why partner delivery is being proposed and how associated program requirements, particularly limits on use of type 2 supplemental agreement, will be addressed.
Wow, there's a whole lot of implications in that question about a whole lot of stuff that I'm sure very few folks in our audience understand. All this talk about type 2 supplemental agreements and FA contracts and time to talk to your coordinator in detail about your project, right? Like that's the real message of this question. Because until you really understand the question and how it might play into your project, it's going to be hard to answer. But if you know, and you've had those conversations, and you do know that perhaps, like in my responsive answer here, a type 2 supplemental agreement will be used to support irrigation-related producer contracts in this project. The type 2 will be planned to complete land leveling for producers who rank out for irrigation water management in their program contracts. Then short-term access to the partner producer lands will be secured by the partner from the interested producers as part of the partner application processing and bundling. So what we've got there is a partner who understands that in order to deliver FA via a type 2 supplemental agreement, they have to already have or have an expectation of a contract between NRCS and a producer, i.e. an eligible producer contract demands the need for a type 2 supplemental agreement. When that exists, oh, hey, it becomes possible for the partner to deliver FA. In this case, they're going to do the land leveling through a large contract with a land leveling contractor so that individual producers don't have to pay for it. But they're only going to do that if the producers already have signed up and implemented their IWM for at least a year. Okay, great. We've got a responsive answer and a way that you might provide partner-delivered TA or partner-delivered FA in a project. Lots of projects come in with the expectation that partners are going to be able to deliver the FA in Classic, absent this tie to producer contracts. And the importance of this question is if you don't have a producer contract, you can't deliver the FA, partner. That's just our statute, our regulatory authority to use the partner supplemental agreement is tied to that producer contract. So you got to have a good answer for this question if you want to deliver FA. Not a responsive answer. Partner will hire contractors to deliver work and or use staff to install practices for producer benefit. Nope. Doesn't recognize any of the limits on the use of a type 2 supplemental agreement. Might fit in an AFA project, absolutely does not fit in a Classic project. So our next group of questions focus on the project area and the proposed work. Here we're really trying to get at the partner's understanding of a particular given project area and the resource concerns that exist there for eligible farmers and ranchers. If you don't have a handle on that and you're just proposing something that strikes you as a good idea, it's probably not the best project. Our best projects directly address a need encountered by producers on the ground. And our best proposals clearly document the partner's understanding of that need and a method to address it.
All right. Take a little break there, Seth. First of three questions related to that topic, project area and proposed work, is question number 3. Describe the rationale for the proposed project area boundary, basically the map. Provide an estimated number of eligible producers in the project area and document the percentage of those producers expected to receive direct benefits from this project.
Thanks. So responsive answer, and I just reread this and decided it wasn't as responsive as I thought it was when I wrote it, but so it goes. Responsive answer, project area established in recognition of common resource issues. That's good, but I don't say what they are. That's not so good. Historic producer participation rates. We use EQIP, which typically receives applications from less than 5% of eligible producers in a given year. So we know that, okay, there's some producers out there and we've got some demand. Our analysis suggests that even if historically low participation rates continue into this project, available funding should be sufficient to address issues on 25% of eligible acres in the project area. How you came up with that isn't presented. And since you're me, how I came up with that isn't presented. It might be better response if it was, but at least the idea is there that, hey, we analyzed the problem, we know it exists, and we think we can get out there and treat a significant portion of it. Great. A less responsive answer would be project area is the whole state of Iowa, which faces widespread resource concerns. Well, if we have an RCPP project with ill-defined resource concerns like this response suggests, and we have the whole state available, it's very unlikely we're going to generate significant impacts to the resource problems, whatever they are. Iowa is a big place. and you're not dealing with a targeted resource concern. You're really just emulating EQIP, which we already have out there to do random acts of environmental kindness. It's not an ineligible project if that second statement were your model, but it's not a very responsive one. If Iowa has 2 applications, the other one may get ranked better. Sorry, I'm going to let you read.
All right. Second of the 3 questions is question number 9. Does the proposal include prioritizing project funding or particular locations or producers based on a scientific assessment or research-based plan? If so, please describe how the approach will be implemented within the RCPP Classic model.
Thanks, Tammy. So this question kind of complements the last one, right? And if you've got a well-defined project area and a well-defined resource problem, the typical NRCS ranking tool is going to do great. And in this case, that's exactly what the partner's committing to. They're saying, no, we think we've got our project well enough defined that all we need to do is use CART and the ranking process, and it's going to select us good applications. Not a complicated answer, not raising the bar or introducing any ambiguity, just saying, yeah, we recognize how you guys do business and it's going to be fine. On the other hand, not a responsive answer and one that leaves us with more questions than it answers. We will use the Iowa State Wildlife Plan to select proposals. Well, no, you can't do that in RCPP Classic because a state wildlife plan is a generic document. It doesn't fit into the CART. It's not going to be a one-to-one match. So something's going to have to happen to translate that Iowa State Wildlife Plan into CART questions, and then maybe it's enough of an answer. Better to recognize how CART works and have had that discussion with your state coordinator and make sure that you can provide a meaningful input if you need to provide any at all.
And then the third question of the 3 project area proposed work questions is question number 17. Identify any specific work, properties, or beneficiaries which the lead partner has determined would further objectives of this RCPP project. Example, list specific parcels targeted for easements, participants' lands targeted for land management, rental, or watershed activity. Listed items will be considered pre-selections. Note, inclusion here does not guarantee an FA award, but may obviate the need for further competition. Additionally, if project partners, members, or their relatives own any of these properties, document those relationships here.
Thanks, Tammy. So responsive answer, and it's probably really important to emphasize that this is for one specific project, right? Don't pattern your responses around my answers. Pattern them around your project. But anyway, responsive answer. This project's entity-held easement budget is targeted for 2 specific parcels, which if determined eligible by NRCS will be appraised and enrolled in the first year of the project. Wow, they told us a lot in that sentence. They've told us that there's EHE, that there's just enough money for 2 parcels, that they're basically pre-selected and they will be enrolled in the first year of the project if there's no eligibility issues. So great, that kind of means our EHE budget is going to be consumed in the first year and the partners recognized the necessity for not only NRCS eligibility, but also appraisal and an enrollment process. Sounds like they know what they're talking about. If either easement parcel is determined ineligible, EHE funds will be moved to land management budget via PPA amendment. Cool, more recognition of project operations and procedures. Maybe one of those parcels is owned by somebody who is HEL non-compliant and therefore the whole parcel is ineligible. So we're not going to be able to get to that one. Rather than have an EHE sign up, the partner wants to address project resource concerns through a regular land management sign up. We're going to have to do a PPA amendment to move that money over, all recognized and hunky-dory. Sounds good. Additionally, land management funding will include up to $300,000 for restoration on the entity-held easement parcels. Oh, cool. So they're going to have a carve-out for restoration, maybe 2 fund pools within their land management money. That's legit. And they're going to manage it discreetly. Cool. Sounds good. Not a responsive answer. Some plan that the proposal references identifies 7 target parcels, but we don't know if those 7 parcels, if there's enough money in the project for those 7 parcels. We don't know if they're going to go through ranking. We don't know if that's actually what they want to fund. The statement is too vague for us to get to what's actually going on there. And it certainly doesn't identify the specific eligible work or locations, which is required. And that's actually missing from my responsive answer. If you are targeting specific parcels, they should be named in your proposal, either by location or farm and tract number, something so that we can argue that they have been selected by the chief's selection of the project and don't have to go through more ranking. So the next group of questions is about outcomes. Outcomes are not outputs, i.e., it's not practices installed, it's the benefit of the practices installed. It's not acres and easements, it's benefit of those acres and easements to whatever the project resource concern is. If it's long-term protection of land, how is the protection of those easement acres going to sustain the local agricultural industry? If it's any other resource concern, a true natural resource concern, what is the benefit to that natural resource concern? So that's outcomes versus outputs. And then what are the questions?
So of the two questions, here's the first one that relates. Question number 4, describe proposed approach for evaluating the success of the project, including specific environmental outcomes. If applicable, also include social and economic outcomes that will be modeled, surveyed, or measured.
So I want to emphasize something about this question because it actually documents an expectation of the program that many partners miss. Basically, you're required to have an environmental outcome, at least one, and it has to align with a CCA resource concern if you're in a CCA project. That's the environmental outcome side of this. Also, if applicable, then social and economic outcomes may be included, but they should only be included in the proposal if the partner is prepared to implement them. Because if the proposal is selected and social and economic outcomes are included in the proposal, they will be expected in the project. So again, no getting around the need for environmental outcomes. The way to get around the need for social and economic outcomes is not to put them in your proposal. Once you do, expect to deliver. So a responsive answer. Partner will randomly select 10 land management contract awardees whose contracts must include edge of field monitoring for 5 years. That's kind of poorly worded, but what the expectation in this project is that edge of field monitoring will be in everybody's contract. And the partner is planning to select only 10 of the contracts, and they're going to do some more analysis on the data collected by those 10 producers through their edge of field monitoring. IWM and nutrient management practices will be installed on those practices, and the edge of field will be monitored. Great, that sounds good. That data will be used to establish a baseline for the producer's fertilizer use per some process. Maybe it's the Iowa University, whatever. You got to have a process. Partner will compare and contract these baseline data with edge of field monitoring data collected by the producer to help inform management. That kind of just goes along with the edge of field monitoring practice standard, but also to support project-wide nutrient management monitoring. That's the outcome side of this particular question, and help identify soils and operational characteristics most conducive to significant nutrient reduction and surface water quality enhancement opportunities. So really what we're saying is this particular project is going to use a sampling technique for outcomes to capitalize on data that the producer is already going to be collecting and extrapolate to maybe future ranking tool improvements that would help focus nutrient monitoring money on those soils that have the most benefit. Seems like a pretty direct and sort of self-contained outcome model, probably more internally consistent than we see in most projects. Most projects have outcomes that are more general and don't sort of feedback as much. But the more you can get to useful data with outcomes, the better. Non-responsive answer. Partner will model reduced nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and do that based on the installed practices. Well, that's nice. It meets the eligibility requirement. It's not really dealing with the success of the project or helping inform the project. It's just kind of a result. Here's some answers. It's going to be eligible, but it's not a great answer.
Okay, and then the second question that relates to the outcomes topic is the question number 8. Describe why the desired implementation approach will most effectively and efficiently achieve conservation outcomes. For example, Will this project utilize covered program templates, processes, or authorities? And if so, which ones? Conversely, will the project benefit from inclusion of new flexible elements of RCPP, for example, an entity-held wetland easement or an innovative new practice? If so, what, if any, coordination has been completed with NRCS to minimize delays associated with proposed flexible project elements?
Thanks, Jeremy. So obviously there's a lot of room in this question because it asks a lot of sub-questions. My responsive answer addresses some of them. The project will use ranking to prioritize specific conservation practices, and we would list them. So then we're getting at, okay, what is going to be in this project with known benefits to the project resource concern. So basically the partner is telling us, yeah, we don't want all the practices available. We want to focus them in on these specific ones. We're not proposing anything particularly innovative. We just know that these are the good practices. That's a legitimate answer. The project area has been specifically tailored in recognition of both common resource problems and documented producer demand. So ideally that statement would be supported by a source, but if it's true, again, it kind of feeds back to that project demand question that underlies all of our proposal evaluations. Is this project actually being put together by a partner in recognition of a problem, or is it being put together by a partner with a proposed solution and they're not actually interested in the problem? We want somebody who's thought through the problem and knows how to fix it. So as to optimize meaningful reduction in resource concern during project life. So again, just kind of recognizing that, hey, only through this tailoring are we really going to get to a change in the situation. Great, you've painted a picture that says you know what you're doing. Not a responsive answer. Partner will develop a pay-per-performance model that will incentivize producer participation. Yeah, they're really talking about how much they love their model and how they think maybe it will incentivize producer participation. But it hasn't been tried out anywhere. There's no real documentation for that assertion. It's not very well thought through. Probably going to move to the bottom of the stack. Really fails to document the extent of the issue and or the solution, I think is that last box, and it's a pretty good summary. So our next group of questions is partners and contributions. Obviously, the statute tells us that partners need to bring a significant portion of project costs. The NFO does not define significant. In fact, we expressly say there is no required ratio. So yes, you have to bring contributions. They need to be meaningful and, you know, quote unquote, significant. So let's see how we might get to that in the answers.
Okay, so the first question related to partners and contributions is question number 7. Describe how partner contributions add value to the proposed project to leverage and multiply the benefits of the potential committed RCPP funding. Example, cash payments to producers based on NRCS typical costs to reduce producer out-of-pocket expenses. NRCS certified planner to provide planning, design, and checkout assistance. Certified eligible entity under ACEP, ALE, or ALE-like proposals. Scientific modeling capacity.
Thanks, Tammy. So responsive answer. Partner will provide FA contributions to producers selected for land management award following certification and checkout of contracted activities. That's FA to producers. Fabulous. Additional partner will provide TAE as contribution. Cool. They're not asking for TAE money and is prepared to hire commercial contractors as needed to support TAE delivery. Well, we don't have staff over here at Partner, but we are more than happy to jump in and act as your intermediary NRCS and get you an engineer or two. Great answer. Not responsive answer. Partner will waive indirect costs up to X. Well, that's neither significant nor does it tell us about the benefits to the project. It's just an eligible contribution. And I'm going to move a little quicker to try to save some time for questions.
Okay, so then the second question relating to partners and contributions is question number 6. Describe the rationale for the partners included in this proposal. Highlight partners' ability to provide resources and or expertise to support project objectives. Highlight any partners with established producer relationships and provide examples of how they've contributed to similar successful projects. Describe lead partner's experience managing and tracking the delivery of third-party contributions if included in the proposal.
I'm not going to read you my responsive answer here, but I am going to just emphasize quantify, quantify, quantify. If you don't give us good examples and you just write stuff in here, writing stuff in here is very uncompelling to reviewers. We like lists, we like numbers, we like documentation, not responsive answers. And this is pretty typical. Partners have lots of experience and that takes 6 paragraphs to explain. And partner Y will do something very specific, which is not authorized by the PPA anyway. Not a responsive answer.
And then the third question relating to that is question number 18. Describe the lead partner's experience and current staff expertise managing federal funding awards or similar conservation projects, including the execution of deliverables and engagement with agricultural producers, including private landowners, to get conservation on the ground.
Same exact advice as the prior slide. Quantify, 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 not generic responses. Will get you a lot further, and I will leave it at that. So we have a final group of questions on outreach, and we will jump into them.
Okay, so there's 2 questions related to that. Question 10, describe proposed producer outreach activities designed to identify, inform, and enroll eligible producers and entities in RCPP contract activities.
So my responsive answer in here has the partners analyzing tracks in the project area based on county assessor records, contacting those individual landowners. Really what I'm trying to emphasize here again is an actual process. Don't tell me you're going to contact landowners. Tell me how you're going to do it in your area, because there's no magical database of producers that make corn appear. You're going to have to go find them if you don't know who they are. So tell me you know who they are and show me how. Like that second answer there, partner will work to identify producers in area and publish announcements in local media. Yeah, okay, we do that every year and we're hitting the same people. If that's all you're going to do, you're not improving on our already flawed process. Help us get better.
And then the second outreach is describe, question number 11, describe partner capacity to identify agricultural producers who have not participated in RCS programs and outreach plan to encourage their participation in the proposed project.
So this is another one where if you don't have employed folks on the ground already and or a really solid system to get there that you want to tell us about, you're going to be best off not making something up. Just say our experience in this particular arena is limited. We will do X, Y, and Z. Don't go further than you think you could. Don't put a bunch of fluff. And if all you're going to do is the generic stuff like host booths at the fair and local events, yeah, you're going to have to write that. It's not going to earn you a great deal of mileage. This final slide talks about the resources to support your proposal. Really, we start with your state coordinator because although we can rant at you from on high here at headquarters, those state coordinators are the folks that are going to help you implement and understand what's going on in your proposed project area at a much more granular level than we ever could. The proposal guide for partners also exists for sort of more procedural stuff. And then, of course, we have the state con questionnaires and the easement questionnaire as well to help inform those conversations. We do ask again that you scan this little survey link and let us know what you think of this week's presentation, ideas for future presentations. And USDA is a non-discriminatory agency. I believe it's time for questions. Is that correct, Bree?
That is correct, in fact.
So I think we're going to give Tammy a second to get organized.
Yep, nope, we are ready to go. So yeah, we'll just start. We have, looks like about 9 minutes, a little less than 9 minutes to go over some questions and answers. Let's look at the first question, and this one will be directed to Eric. Eric, question number 15. If we're not necessarily using climate smart practices, but are addressing climate change mitigation and adaptation, should we still address this question as such? And could this qualify us for IRA bucket funding?
RCPP projects are not required to use climate smart practices to be eligible for IRA funds. Projects addressing climate change, mitigation, and or adaptation will be evaluated for IRA funding based on how well the resource conditions, treatments, and metrics for reporting outcomes are described.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Next question will be for Seth. If a question only asks about land management financial assistance, which is question number 16, and your RC proposal, though, is strictly EAGFA, so entity held easement FA, do you skip that question?
I was going to go back and find the question because I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, so yeah, the question only asks about land management financial assistance, but the RCPP proposal is strictly held easement.
Correct. Thank you for buying me a little time, Tammy. In this particular case, the question does focus on land management and is really focused on the use of a type 2 supplemental to deliver some of that land management assistance. Your response to this question, if you're in a land management only or an entity held easement only project, or even any other project that doesn't include land management funding, would be this project does not include land management funding and will not use a type 2 supplemental agreement. Done.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to kind of stick on the easements one here for just a second. Seth, can all of our parcels be pre-selections? Example, if we already have all of our projects selected.
Yes, and in fact, you'll find when you work through the easement state con questionnaire with your coordinator that pre-identification of easement parcels, and even better still, the pre-identification of the specific deed templates that will go with them, is going to go a long way towards accelerating the implementation of your project. So especially in easement projects, whether it's US or entity held, the concept of targeting to specific high value parcels is encouraged, and it will accelerate the implementation of your project. Really, for easements and watersheds, those are almost, in watersheds, it's almost necessary. In easements, it definitely accelerates the process.
Great, thank you, Seth. All right, the next question will be for Eric. Question number 9, can a hybrid version of CART be utilized, such as a first run-through CART, then a further analysis of the project ranking based on an even more local set of questions for the project area?
No, but a way to handle that kind of focus would be for partners to bundle applications of targeted producers they worked with. Such applications can receive up to 25% of the program points in CART.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Well, and to follow up with that, concerning the ranking, is ranking priority given to projects with pre-selections?
No, there is no priority nor any penalty for that. It's just the basic model there is if the chief makes a project selection and the proposal included targeted parcels, we can bypass ranking. That's really the agency's perspective on that question. We don't care one way or the other. It's just an authority question.
Okay. Then Seth, you may want to address this one too. If an RCPP prioritizes something that current ranking criteria deprioritizes, example, ALE, GSS, parcels less than county farm size, is that innovation or is that just a tweak within the ranking?
That's just a tweak within the ranking. We don't use the covered program ranking tools or requirements that directly anyway. So it's really more just a project ranking consideration in that example provided. There might be other examples, but.
Thank you, Seth. The next question we might have to actually come back to, but just Seth, if you want to give this one a shot. Our project is a watershed project. As such, many questions seem not to apply. Is that okay?
Yes. Although watershed projects have very specific requirements, right? You have to have an NRCS approved watershed plan per the NFO. If you don't, you need to request a waiver to that requirement. Don't know if it'll be provided. And then you've got to figure out a way to use the narrative questions to actually paint a compelling picture for the need for your project. So if you've left out the land management question that we highlighted a second ago, as somebody pointed it out, And you've left out 4 other questions as well because you decided they don't apply. And now you've realized, oh, hey, I haven't painted a very compelling picture for my project. You're going to have to go back and abuse some of the questions. There's just no way around it. So remember that the purpose of the questions is to sell your project and figure out a way to do that without getting too far off the questions.
Okay, thank you, Seth. And then we'll have another one here. So I'll just quick, we've got 3 minutes to go. So when it comes to documentation, is a full citation considered too wordy? Is it okay to include web links? Is that sufficient?
There is like a 4,000 character limit on the questions. And obviously, if you're using up 250 for a full citation, you're probably going too far. I think just either a web link or a name and a year is probably adequate. We're not here to double fact check you. We just want you to have done your homework.
Okay, great. Probably for you two again. Where can applicants find more information on Type 2 supplemental agreements to be able to properly prepare for discussions with the states and local NRCS offices?
That's an interesting question. Our e-directive system is public. You could type in NRCS e-directives and then find national instruction for 4315 that explicitly describes the Type 2 supplemental agreement. You're going to be better served by just talking to your coordinator because the rules are weird. The underlying regulatory limit is you cannot use a Type 2 supplemental agreement absent the determination by NRCS that the use of the Type 2 supplemental is necessary for the success of a producer contract, an approved watershed plan, or an entity-held easement. Really what that means is the only use of Type 2 in Classic is for watersheds or for support of a producer contract as determined necessary by NRCS. So you got to talk to NRCS about that necessity.
Okay, thank you, Seth. Last question due to time. By pre-selecting, you avoid ranking. Does that save much procedural time, application processing time, headaches for NRCS staff? I'm wondering what the actual tangible benefit to pre-selection is.
So in an entity-held easement or U.S.-held easement project, there's a lot of details that have to be sorted out about the land, the deed, the level of restriction appropriate to the deed. And so pre-selection can help because you can get a jump on those things even during proposal negotiation, so that once you get to PPA implementation, you can save maybe a year, maybe 2 years of your project life if you've spent 6 months loosely talking to NRCS and working through some of the stuff. Less so on land management. Land management, our ranking process is pretty slam dunk, but you do still save time. Like if you have a couple big land management projects that are going to consume big chunks of money, you might want to make those be your first year sign up and then have the rest of your first competitive sign up be in year 2. That would be legit. You just sort of have to think through the timing benefits of that. And that would be a good discussion with your coordinator as well.
Great. Thank you, Seth. We are at the top of the hour. I'm going to turn it back over to Bree to do closeout.
Thanks, everyone. Just a quick reminder, thank you for your great questions today and for your participation. Thank you to all of our presenters. Just as a reminder, if you wouldn't mind completing the survey, we're eager for your feedback, and we look forward to receiving your feedback and to connecting with you during our next webinar. Have a great long weekend, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks, everyone.